Hello, hello, and welcome to today's podcast. Today, we are going to be building on our episode on sarcopenia and talk a little more in depth about protein. And I know we talked about protein a lot already, and we talk about it probably all the time. We hear from so many people that they've never felt more peer pressure than what they're getting right now in midlife to eat more protein.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to sprinkle a little bit of fiber in here too while we're at it. But protein is certainly something that there's a lot of buzz about that. Whether you're on Instagram or whether you're on any social media platform, you're going to hear a lot about that and a lot of opinions about it too. So, but it kind of we got led astray basically, the way I see it too, to an extent. So back in the old days in the 90s with the food pyramid, you know, how things were essentially kind of centered around carbs as the foundation, so that foundation was really something that led us down the pathways of some chronic disease processes that are showing up now for folks. So,
and for those of you that don't know, there was a big change in the USDA's recommendations at the beginning of 2026. And we did have a little bit of a shift in between the old food pyramid that most people of our generation are familiar with. We transitioned from that to My Plate, which kind of looked more on portion control and things of that nature. And then now we've moved into this new food pyramid that's basically the old food pyramid turned up on its side, where now we're looking at more protein focus, which is a good thing. I think we're learning that that protein is really important, saving our muscle as we age.
Yeah, and you look at a lot of folks that are in this midlife age bracket, they're the ones that are still operating on that broken system, if you will. So those are the ones that they're fighting the type 2 diabetes and everything else that goes along with that, with chronic disease and all.
So why protein matters in midlife? Why are we talking about this again?
Yeah, so protein, we'll just do some real basic stuff. It's the foundation for muscle preservation, period. I mean, full stop. It's something that basically proteins are made up of amino acids, different lengths of those, different chains of amino acids. And, protein is utilized for all kinds of structures throughout our body. Protein is just that. It's a structural component. It's a signaling component for enzymes and hormones. It even has to do with your immune system, with antibody formation. And then, of course, nutrient transportation, glucose, literally glucose and waste gets transported with proteins. So you can see the importance of it. It makes up everything and just essentially runs everything. So it's certainly, that's the reason why it's much more emphasized now.
And then from a metabolic standpoint, it also takes more energy to break protein down and metabolize it. And it's also very satisfying. So it's when you eat protein, it's going to curb your hunger and your cravings.
Yeah. So, why does it matter in midlife? Because basically muscle protein synthesis starts declining with age. About 30 years old, we decline just as our muscles start to atrophy, if you will. It's kind of sarcopenia, 1% a year on average, but that's if we don't do anything about it. So it's really something more that the older we get, the more we have anabolic resistance, which is our ability to produce or make muscle. And that's where and why we need more. So because we're fighting this from an age-related standpoint, hormone-related standpoint. And so, it's something that needs to be emphasized more to maintain or keep what we have.
So previously, the USDA, the recommendations on the food pyramid were a lot less protein than what is actually necessary to optimize health. And that's where this new thought is coming in. So optimizing health, it looks different for everyone. And we know now that there are higher levels needed for optimal protein intake.
Right. So, deficiency, there's a difference between just preventing muscle waste and weakening, as well as there's a difference between trying to build and preserve and increase muscle. So, the old RDA average suggested only, 0.36 grams per pound. And, that's not going to optimize your health and will really preserve muscle to an extent. That's more of just being able to live, essentially. But now the target is much, much higher. We're at least double that. So we tell our patients that 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight is really an optimal place to try to be, but it's very difficult to achieve that too.
Yes. And that's really for muscle building. That's to be at a place where you can really be building muscle.
And it's going to complement, that has to complement your lifestyle, activity, and movement. You've got to optimize your lifestyle. Your hormone levels have to be optimized. You have to have the right exercise program, movement programs in place to be able to get the benefits from having that. And a lot of people, they go to the gym, they'll do these activities, they'll perform their runs or their weightlifting, resistance training. But if you're not providing the fuel for your body to make the muscle, it's very difficult to create that.
Yeah. One thing I will add in here, because GLP-1s are so widely used today, this is another key component of the protein conversation. And when you are on a GLP-1 and you have a suppressed appetite, it's very hard to want to go to protein as your fuel. Sometimes you may have some nausea along with that, and you're already struggling with a delayed gut mobility. So protein isn't the go-to.
Right.
And it really needs to be, because when you're operating at such a huge deficit, it's even that much more important.
So, of course, the GLP-1s are a good caloric restrictor, but your body doesn't care, where it takes its energy from. It'll get some from muscle, but also from fat. And that's the reason why, if we're not replacing or trying to build that muscle layer to try to maintain that muscle, that's when people start getting weaker and losing percentages of their muscle with GLP-1s.
So next, let's talk about distribution of your protein throughout your day.
Lots of theories on that one. So, the best thing to do is really to try to keep your protein spread out. Whatever your feeding window is for the day, try to spread it out. Try to localize it as much as you can. It would be a good idea to try to focus some of that around, workout times too. 30 to 40 grams is about all your body's going to be able to handle to break down in protein at a setting. Excuse me. So that's keeping that in mind, 30, 40 grams at a time. And you start cramming all this into feeding windows that we only have the restricted times of the day, maybe, that we're eating with. If you're doing, restricted feedings, then it's hard to get all that protein in, hard to get it down. So you got to get creative.
And it's really important to note here that the difference between men and women, because women really do need protein around workouts most of the time. I have a hard time ever doing a hard fast, like this is the way it is for every person every time, because we know and practice that everybody is different. But typically women do better if they have some nutrition fuel around a workout.
Exactly. Yeah. And that kind of goes for men too. But, especially for women, I think that's important. But the key is to spread it out. Try not to skip the breakfast. Don't stack all your protein intake in one meal. If a 150-pound person's got to get close to 150 grams of protein, that's a lot of protein. And, short of carrying beef jerkies and chicken breasts around all the time to eat on it, it's tough to kind of get all that in. So, and our theory too is try to stick with your source of protein from whole meals, whole foods in your meals. It's okay to protein supplement, and there's options there, and we can talk about that, but we really like for people to try to get their protein from whole foods, and then supplement their protein intake and their amino acid intakes from other options.
And this is a good time to bring up the fact that there are people who are vegan and vegetarian, and they're getting their protein from plant-based options. And absolutely, that is something that you can do. And this is another point where people, what is best for your body. And so it's absolutely doable. It can be a little harder to get that vegetarian and vegan protein in, but absolutely doable.
Right. Yeah. So, you basically have complete proteins and then incomplete proteins. Well, complete proteins, they'll have all the 9 essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are amino acids that we don't make, our body doesn't make. We have to get those in our diet. Those can be primarily, the best sources of those are usually meats. And so if you can see that if an individual doesn't eat meat, well, they're going to have some troubles trying to get those essential amino acids in. So there are ways to do that, but it takes a lot more effort. And incomplete proteins are basically missing a lot of some of those essential amino acids that we really need. And specifically, the big guy is leucine. That's the big amino acid on the block. That's the one that signals the protein synthesis. And it's the most important one. And that's the one that we'll typically see a lot more in the meat and animal products. So plant versus animal proteins. I think we spoke about that. That is something that plant proteins are okay. It just takes more of them to really achieve the levels that we need. And, but an animal protein is more of the one that's got the leucines. It's more bioavailable too for the body. Folks that have a lot of plant protein as their source really need to look at, soy and quinoa and hemp, tofu, those types of things to try to get those essential amino acids. And they just need to push a lot more of that. Now, can you build muscle on plant proteins? Yes, you can. It's just a little harder.
And then we already touched on protein timing and talking about how it's a little bit different for men and women as far as when to put that in.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is important to talk about, especially when we're talking about when you're eating during the day and trying to get all of this protein in, something to consider is how close you eat to bedtime. Now, not only does this affect sleep, but it can also cause GI issues with reflux and things of that nature. So just be aware of where you're getting the protein put in for that reason.
Yeah. So it's, like we spoke, it's very satiating. So it satisfies your hunger and it lasts longer. I mean, the thermogenic effect of food is higher with protein. So it burns more. You have to burn more calories to eat protein. That's another benefit of the protein intake. Whereas carbohydrates are quite a bit, they're quite a bit lower on the spectrum. But the calories, it's 20 to 30 on protein, about 3 to 10 on carbs, and then fats are in the lower echelon. There's not much effort, not much caloric benefit with fat. But, you want to speak about the meal splitting for families. You had mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. So one thing that we hear a lot is that women are having to make separate meals. So they're making their own meals and then they're making a different meal for their family just to make sure. And this is not really anything to do specifically on protein. This kind of has to do with a lot of the lifestyle recommendations around nutrition and
kids and their palates too. I mean, kids want to eat chicken nuggets, and have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Well, that's not always an optimal thing for an adult in midlife to do those types of things, to at least get their protein requirements and nutritional requirements in. So, but yeah, we're always having that conversation with patients about, them trying to find time to get their protein in and still keep their family and their kids fed and keep them up and rolling. And then you throw in activities into the mix, and it makes it even harder because now people are traveling a lot more, and that's always harder to try to get your protein in. And it's not that we want to encourage people to have to track their protein all the time at every meal. I think it's a good idea for them to try to get a general feel for how much protein it takes during the day from a recommended standpoint to get near that 1 gram per protein a pound of 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So it's a difficult thing to do. And so if people can kind of get in their head that, well, maybe I need to focus my meals around the protein instead of adding a protein. Sometimes that's an easier way to get it. So maybe doubling up on the amount that you actually get in. It's still okay to throw in the vegetables and fruits, but try to minimize those processed foods and the grains and the carbs as much as we can.
Yeah, I think the other thing to note is that you have to know where you're at before you move forward. And I'm hearing this in my head that I've said it many times before, but it's worth saying again. So if you track your protein for 3 days right now, you'll figure out where you are, what you're getting. And it may be as low as 60 grams of protein in a day. Pretty easily could be, even if you're eating 3 meals. That's 20 grams of protein per meal. And we know that it takes more like 30 grams of protein per meal with snacks to get to the recommended for optimal. But you can't just in a day go from 60 to 150. That's just not sustainable and wouldn't be. So you have to kind of figure out where you are now and then slowly increase that. And as you're increasing it, it's really important. This is where fiber comes in.
Right.
Because what people notice, what we hear, is that as they're adding protein, their gut mobility is changing. And sometimes constipation is now an issue, which is why fiber is such an important thing, because people get so focused on the protein, they're not eating any of the fiber and the good vegetables and all of that to complement it.
Right. So, but the benefits of fiber is that it helps slow glucose absorption, and it feeds the gut microbiome. It's going to blunt those blood sugar spikes, which create the insulin resistance and sensitive and improve sensitivities for folks. But, feeding that gut microbiome with some good fiber on a regular basis will help us to produce those short chain fatty acids. It's going to help reduce your inflammation too. So, but it also really increases your satiety. So it also acts like protein, but it also helps you to maintain that amount of satisfaction. So in other words, carbs will go in and go out, and then you're hungry again. And so it really doesn't help things for you. But, supporting the regular bowel movements is an important part of fiber.
Yes. And really, gut health is attached to so many other things that cause issues, especially in midlife. And that's another reason why fiber is so important. And really, we're looking for 25 grams of fiber a day for women and 35 for men. That's also hard to get.
Because the average is 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day for an average adult, and it's just not enough. And then so now we're throwing a lot of other foods that may not be the best choices for us in there, and that just really upsets gut microbiomes quite a bit for people. So, but the difference between, there's soluble and insoluble forms of fiber. The soluble part would be the ones that kind of form the gels, if you will, inside the gut and slows digestion. It also helps to lower cholesterol, of course, and stabilizes the blood sugar. Whereas the insoluble fibers didn't really dissolve. They kind of add bulk to the stool. So, but we really need to have a combination of both, a mix of both the soluble and the insoluble to kind of get the best benefits from both sides.
And the best sources of fiber are, leafy green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, fruits, berries, apples, pears, beans, whole grains is great. Focusing on not the refined grains like white flour and things of that nature. Nuts and seeds, chia, basil seeds, flax seeds, hemp. Those are great.
Basil seeds
great
are
forms
really
of fiber.
So what about the protein supplements? So if we can't get our protein intake from whole foods, where are we going to get our supplementation from?
And this can be tricky too.
Yes, it's very tricky because some individuals will have sensitivities to various things, whether it be casein or whey or, what have you.
Or beef. Some people
Right.
can't do beef for
Mm-hmm.
variety of reasons. So the things to look for when you're looking at protein powders, my number one thing is as few ingredients as possible.
That you can pronounce.
Yes, as few ingredients as possible. And you really have to watch protein powders for added sugar or sugar alternatives. We've talked about kind of the acceptable forms of sweeteners before, but stevia, monk fruit, allulose, and erythritol are the ones that are the best. Trying to stay away from artificial sweeteners where you can, because those can be inflammatory sometimes. And honestly, all of these things, you do have to know what's going on with your body. Like, for instance, my food sensitivity test showed that monk fruit is not a good option for me. So,
right. And the others may be whey or casein. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, whey protein is kind of your, I don't know, it's high in the leucine, which is the important amino acid we really need to help support. But also it's a fast digester. So it works good for post workouts and smoothies and things like that. So you can get a lot of options out there.
So we have some recommendations. We'll put them in the show notes, but it is a trial and error to find the one that feels good to you, that your body can digest easily when you need it. As far as fiber supplements go, whole foods are best. Obviously, we kind of talked about that, the seeds and nuts.
Yeah, real food's always better. Real stuff's always better.
Psyllium husk is a supplement that you can get pretty frequently. This is also one to be careful with, some of those things that you can get at the grocery store. Just look for what is in the supplement. You want to make sure that you're not trying to do something good and then supplementing in something that may be counterbalancing that.
Yeah. So practical strategies. Excuse me. So practical strategies. Meal prepping. That's something we always try to do a lot. It's a good way to try to be consistent, which we talk about a lot, is consistency, whether it's working out or nutrition. But it's a good way to try to be consistent about getting your protein intake. It's not as easy to do. You got to plan ahead. You got to grocery shop for it, et cetera, et cetera. But trying to get a batch of protein, a batch of chicken or meats or eggs or turkey, whatever works, whatever your palate likes, whatever your family likes.
So looking for 30 grams of protein per meal. And there are a lot of great resources out there that are recipes specifically around this. 30 grams of protein and good fiber. Nest Wellness is one I know that, it's leaving me right now, but there are lots of other people who are making recipes specifically with this guideline in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course your breakfast protein is really optimal. Having that bagel or that toast or that pancake or that donut. These things are obviously, we're not talking about protein sources. So, but if you have those types of things that are not proteins, then you're going to be hungry quickly. So the best option is to try to keep that protein. That'll help kind of satiate you throughout the day.
Yeah, and smoothies are a great option. Just make sure that you've got fat and fiber in those smoothies too, to kind of
slows absorption.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can try to track it for 3 days. See if you can get it tracked down for just a few days to see, okay, like you mentioned, trying to see where you're at, and then try to track it later for a few more days to see what you need to do to try to reach that goal. Is always a helpful thing to do.
So we put together kind of a sample day of eating. This would be for 130 grams of protein and 35 grams of fiber. So breakfast is 3 scrambled eggs with spinach, avocado, berries on the side. That's 20 grams of protein and 8 grams of fiber for breakfast.
The snack, any type of snack mid-morning, Greek yogurt with almonds, 15 grams of protein there with 3 grams of fiber.
Grilled chicken with salad and mixed greens, chickpeas, olive oil. For lunch, 35 grams of protein, 10 grams of fiber.
And another mid-afternoon snack, like myself, always needing that, protein shakes are good. Then, get some whey protein, throw some berries and spinach in that. You're going to get 25 grams of protein and 5 grams of fiber.
You could even up that fiber if you put a little flaxseed in there
just
too.
Put some seeds in there. You know it. And people also wonder about collagen is a protein powder. It's not a complete protein. It's low in leucine. So it doesn't have really as much as what we need to really build the muscle. So I just want to throw that in there. Actually, just brought that to my attention.
Yeah.
So, dinner.
Salmon with roasted Brussels sprouts and quinoa, 35 grams of protein and 10 grams of fiber.
So when you look at these 2 snacks with these 3 meals that can start at 7 a.m. and run at dinner till 6 or 7 in the evening, you're looking at 130 grams of protein.
And I can tell you that this sample day of eating would be really hard for me.
Yeah.
I would have a hard time getting in 3 meals and snacks.
Yeah, right. Because that's very early. We don't typically eat breakfast at 7 a.m. So, and especially if somebody's going to be intermittent fasting, they're going to have a smaller feeding window. And so that's where it gets harder and trickier. And that's where, having the protein bars or the protein drinks to help supplement that is sometimes a helpful thing.
So I hope this wasn't too much reiteration of things that we've talked about a lot in the past, but something to think about and really think about where you're at right now with protein and what questions you have. Reach out with those questions. And
just remember that it takes a lot of protein to try to build muscle. And, it's one of those things that, like I was talking with Tandi about earlier, is that I don't know of any 80-year-old people that say I'm too strong. They all want to be stronger. And wherever you want to be at 70 or 80 years old, you got to do your homework now. It's just not going to happen unless you do something about it. So we hope that you've gained a little bit of insight off what we've got presented for you today.
Have a healthy day.